we have the pleasure of speaking with Joel Hodgson, creator and star of Cinematic and Titanic, Mystery Science Theater, a bunch of other interesting projects. An all-around great guy for sitting down to talk to us. How you doing, Joel?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here on We Hate Movies.
Thanks so much. I just want to kind of get into like a little prehistory here, pre-Mystery Science Theater history. You started out in stand-up and had kind of a meteoric rise almost immediately. You know, you had the opportunity to move out to L.A. You had David Letterman appearances, and there was sort of an unexpected decision for you to stop and move back to Minneapolis. I just want to know, maybe you could take us behind the thoughts behind that.
I just had really good timing when I started doing my act. And I happened to start right when, in the early 80s, when cable was just kind of starting. And it just kind of ignited stand-up, because stand-up, it just works so great on cable. Because of that, the comedy scene was just starting, and so I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and so I think that has a lot to do with all the opportunities I got.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you mentioned, I got to do Letterman and Saturday Night Live, and I got on the Young Comedian special, and all I really set out to do was to get on Letterman because I really thought it was funny, and so that was my inspiration, and all those other things just kind of came with it. And at the end of it all, the only thing left for me to do was to be on a sitcom, and I got offered a sitcom, and I just didn't think it was funny, and I told the guy I didn't want to do it, and they came back and they doubled their money, and it was just like I realized my opinion was meaningless in Hollywood because they could just keep throwing money at you until you said yes. So I thought there was a much bigger issue at play than just making money, and I've been lucky. I'd kind of gotten to do my own work.
It's kind of cool to hear somebody that actually walks away from money for creative reasons. You don't hear that story very often.
Yeah, it was kind of in the air. There was. I kind of have to cite like the Replacements. They were like a really influential band out of Minneapolis, and all their music was about that dance of creative integrity versus having to get in bed with a record company. And so it was kind of my own story too, where I could kind of feel like it would really dilute who I was. Another weird thing was they actually had me come in and read for the part of Woody on Cheers.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, and this just goes to show you like how far out of it I was. I didn't really like Cheers. I didn't revere it and think it was great at the time. And now I think it's really funny. But I remember going in and reading for that part, and I have to say, man, when I watched Woody Harrelson do it, I just didn't have the chops. I wasn't really an actor.
Yeah,
I just could do my stand-up act. So I'm not saying that I would have been given that part, just because I just don't think I probably didn't do a good audition. But
well, he had the leg up on you. He did have the name already, so.
Yeah, maybe they gave him that. I mean, I don't even remember what the name of the character was when I was reading for it, but yeah, exactly. That's probably how he got it. But anyway, the whole mood was, there was just kind of a shift in Hollywood, and I didn't really want to kind of sign off on. When you're an actor, I think it's really different. I think you kind of part of the game of being an actor is kind of being able to be molded to whatever situation you're in. But when you're a stand-up, it's much more autonomous. It's really your point of view, and it's really who you are. And I found it really hard to, and it's probably because I'm not an actor, and I think I found it really hard to kind of get molded into kind of accepting the challenge of being a character that or being having someone else kind of puppeteer me.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I left. I kind of gave up. I quit doing stand up, and I went back home and went back to Minneapolis, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I really thought I wouldn't be doing stand up anymore. And I remember I had an auction and I sold my props, and it was just kind of, nobody really took me very seriously about quitting, and so I quit doing stand up, and I started doing other things that were interesting to me. I started working with some toy inventors, and I remember rebuilding like GoBots. Remember the GoBots?
Yeah.
It was like a cartoon. I remember I used to do like kind of do cleaning and maintenance on GoBot costumes. It was like a guy, and he just had all these costumes that did public appearances, personal appearances.
Yeah, I mean,
he had to fix them and maintain them and stuff, and I didn't exactly know what I was going to do exactly, and then I started doing stuff for other comics, selling them like my ideas and selling them some of my old props, and then I slowly started to think about maybe doing it again, coming back to it.
It seems like Minneapolis is, it is more fostering to a creative spirit than Los Angeles, and you kind of you move back to Minneapolis and you sort of have a lot of these ideas that are not stand-up based and not sitcom based. Where was Mystery Science Theater and all that? Was that an idea kicking around your head for a while? Something you always kind of wanted to do?
Well, I think it kind of crystallized. When I was in college, there was this book the Medved brothers did called the Turkey Awards. Have you ever seen that?
I'm not.
It's really great because they basically made a book about the worst movies ever made. And I don't know how it ended up in our dorm, but I remember reading it going, why isn't anybody making a show with this? Why isn't anybody showing these movies? And I think that was kind of part of the genesis of it. The other piece of it was when I was in high school, I remember looking at this album cover for Elton John, and he had silhouettes watching a movie, and it was the album Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and there was all these illustrations for each song, and there was a song called I've Seen That Movie Too, and there were like three people watching a movie in silhouette, and I remember in high school saying, oh, that would make a great TV show, superimposing people over a movie and having them talk about it. So I think those two things were kind of the biggest single, kind of moments in the creation of it. And the other thing, a book called The Psychotronic Film Guide. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not.
It was just a book, and it was just a book about just weird movies you've never seen. And this is like, in today's world, you can just, like any movie that I'd mentioned, you could go online and probably buy a DVD of it. But back then, it was very mysterious. Like, they'd have midnight movies that they'd show weird movies, and they'd have art house theaters where they'd show like Eraserhead and Rocky Horror, and then maybe you'd see stuff on TV, but it wasn't easy and available to find these movies. So I remember reading that book too and thinking, oh yeah, this is like happening. This is like a real, maybe it's a movement. Maybe there's, this is the second book I've read about weird, eclectic movies. Maybe this is...
You're coming in at the VHS age where people are actually, trying to stock up on movies, and movies that, some people liked, some people didn't like, ironic. The ability to view a movie ironically, obviously, was kind of becoming more and more.
You know what? I think that's a really, actually very deep idea. The idea of watching a movie ironically was kind of happening at the same time. I think you're right. It's like once there's this abundance of movies, you start to go, oh, there's a fair amount of movies that we can kind of enjoy ironically. And so I think that, that's an ongoing thing where you kind of realize, oh yeah, that's right. There's a moment where you can actually, segment the way you watch movies. And this is a movie I really want to see, and this is a movie I'd watch because I think it's really crazy.
Yeah, and both of those could be Nicolas Cage movies, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Depending on the week. I was kind of curious how important the conceit of the show was to you. Was it? I mean, you could have just gone on and just been silhouettes with three guys, but you chose to do, the robot theme and the isolation of being on a satellite and kind of performing this like puppet show with the idea the character doesn't know anybody's watching. Was that important to you, or was that just sort of dressing it up to make it look more like a show?
I think 20 years ago was just a much more formal time for TV. You never saw anything superimposed on the screen other than like in Minneapolis, like the storm warnings. Like were coming. That was the only thing you'd ever see. Other than that, it was like very segmented. You'd watch a movie, and then they'd run the commercials, and then the host would come on, and it was much more formal, and I felt that if it's just guys sitting there, it's too cynical. It's like, if they don't like it, why don't they leave? And so I kind of felt like there had to be this conceit, like the guy can't help it somehow.
Yeah.
Or, I think initially too, it was really like, he was alone with these robots, and he was trying to broadcast to Earth and trying to communicate, fill the airtime with stuff that people might want to watch. And, but that was really like the pilot. And then, once we started to really think about it, we realized, it needs a theme song. And once we wrote the theme song, that's when the Mats came in, and premise that he's being held against his will. That was just like the perfect kind of gesture to make him maintain being a nice guy instead of like being an asshole, like a guy who he's just cynical and makes fun of movies,
No, yeah. You sort of sympathize with him a lot more because he's being forced to watch these things, that he's got no control where they start or stop, kind of a thing.
Exactly. So I think all those things kind of, we really figured them out in the KTMA days, and really by the time, I mean, we're so lucky because we really figured everything out in those 22 shows we did at KTMA. By the end of it, it took that long just to figure out what movie riffing was and to figure out how it fits in the context of the show. And if we would have just been like a regular show where, we think you're funny and we're going to give you money to write a pilot and you go off and make this, it just never would have happened. There's just no way. I mean, personally, I wouldn't have been capable to figure that out. It took that kind of gestation period of kind of like doing it once a week for, half a year, and being with people like, Trace Beaulieu, who's like really good at improv, and Josh Weinstein, who's a really good joke writer. So it's kind of like those guys, I think, moved the ball forward just as much as I did as far as figuring out what this was,
And the benefit of sort of doing it for that long and taping it for that long, I'm sure that's what made it a lot easier to sell. I can't imagine walking into any studio's office at that time and saying, hey, I have this idea where I'm on a spaceship and I watch movies and we make fun of them. To show somebody that it looks like a real package. Was the show difficult to sell?
Well, you're right. I mean, it really helped us sell it because we cut together a sell tape from the best moments of the show. And to me, that's when I looked at it and go, oh, yeah, we have to start writing this. It's like we can't improvise it. And I never liked improvising. It's just like not my thing. And I always felt like Josh and Trace were so much better at it than I was. And so I was much more interested in doing that and going, Yeah, we have to start writing this now because my friends are going to see this. It's going to be a national show, and so that cell tape that we made to sell the Comedy Channel on it was the moment I kind of go, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, it should all be like this. We have to do the whole thing like this.
Put work into it, write it out, and make sure we're not messing up, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, it's really funny, and I think too it is such a. I mean, now it seems so obvious, but 20 years ago it wasn't obvious at all. Like how you did it. Like how do you write dialogue to go with video? Like how do you assign it? How like with YouTube, it's just all laid out for you. But back then it was just there was no bellwether, nothing to guide you, and it was like when I said to Jim Allen, I go, yeah, we got to start writing this, and he goes, oh well, you know what? You use a time code, and I kind of like didn't really grasp it, like, well, what's that, and he just said, well, listen, I'll show you. And they burnt the time code into the movie, and then as we wrote it, as we watched it, we'd stop and record the time code and start adding riffs, and that was the missing, kind of element to kind of do it and to kind of manage all the material that was coming. As if you had the time code, you could lock it into space somewhere.
Yeah, I mean that's so crucial to the show's success because it's sort of when you're sitting down and like obviously you guys have seen the movie 20 times or whatever and have this written out routine. It's kind of like you're sitting down with people that are the fastest human beings on the planet. You know what I mean? Like every joke is hitting and it's perfectly timed, and it's a great illusion to have that.
Yeah, it's really funny. People want to believe that we're magic and that we really just think that fast and it's all perfectly placed. And I was just always interested in like kind of pulling back the curtain and going, no, we write it. This is how we do it. It just didn't seem right to. And I'm really glad I did too, because I just think people just want to believe. I mean, even now when they meet me, they want me to be like that. They want me to talk like that and have a million funny arcane references and
just at your fingertips.
They really want that. Yeah, it's like they so want that, and it's kind of like I go, no, it's a clever illusion.
So right now seems like a really good time to sort of be a Mystery Science Theater fan, and I'm sure like you said, people are coming up to you. The show's like in its fourth life now on Netflix Instant. You had the VHS time, you had DVD, and like I'm sure all these different booms. There's so much exposure for this show. Even now, I'm here. I'm talking about this show with my friends more than I did, 15 years ago when I watched it on TV.
Yeah.
Is it like rewarding to see it kind of live on this way?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, it's really great, and it's really fun that, I think it was. Listen, when we started on cable, there just wasn't. It was really not. Nobody took cable seriously at all. I mean, there was just like MTV and maybe the beginnings of CNN, but now cable is much clearer path in the broadcast world because you really have these distinctive brands. Back in the day, the three big networks, they did everything. They did comedy, they did sports, they did news, and it makes sense to kind of break it up and have it all different. But back then, nobody really thought much of it, and that's how we were able to slip through. They just so needed content, and our show was so cheap, and it was an hour and a half long, and it worked. It worked really good in that situation, and I think that's how we slipped into it all.
It just seems like something that nobody kind of expected to work because it would be this disposable entertainment. But it's the best way to watch these movies. Like a lot of these movies, I would never imagine watching. Something like Mitchell, which is actually one of my favorite movies. One of the favorite episodes you guys did was I could never imagine just sitting down to watch that myself.
Yeah, exactly. It's like The other thing that was really weird was we weren't really considered like a comedy show. I mean, like real comedy was like the Pythons and like SCTV and SNL and all those shows built everything from the ground up, where you could be riffing on an idea. Like SCTV does this brilliant sketch that's a riff on the movie The Oscar. Did you ever see it where it's like the Pulitzer?
No.
It's really crazy and it's so elaborate. And in a way, I mean, this is what's so incredible about SCTV is that they would dedicate like 8 minutes or something to a parody of a movie that it's not likely anybody had seen, which was this, crazy movie called The Oscar, and they did a send up of it called The Pulitzer, and it was just like, and that was the coin of the realm is you kind of had to make it out of whole cloth, and movie riffing is different because it's kind of making a parody of something as it's happening.
Mm.
So it didn't really, in some ways, people didn't really look at it like comedy exactly. It wasn't really, I don't know why, but it just didn't really it didn't have the same heft or profile as working on like Murphy Brown or some other show,
Yeah.
And now it's like 20 years later, it's like people don't really see that big of a difference, between them. And in fact, in some ways, Mystery Science Theater has outlived some of those shows.
Well, no, it absolutely has because it ages so well because all you're doing is reacting to something that's on the screen. It's not like you're trying to make jokes about topics of the day or whatever. You know what I mean? It's so long as if you're sitting at home watching the movie, you're still making, that Joe Don Baker should not be in an action movie and you're laughing at that,
Yeah. It's like the thing that you're not dependent on people having the same reference point because the reference point is just past the people making fun of it. So we're all observing the same thing. So
exactly,
it's kind of worked in its favor. It's very peculiar, and that's the thing that's just constantly astonishing to me that people are still there's people out there still interested in it, still watching it.
Yeah, I know that's so. Like, was the I know that there was sort of Mitchell was your last episode. I think it's like I said, I think it's one of the best. Was that? Did you set that out to be your best? Was it sort of a go out with a bang? Was that kind of part of your mentality there?
Well, I don't remember. I don't think so. I think it was completely lucky. And the reason why I think is we didn't really have a clear idea that kind of a pedestrian cop drama would be great movie riffing. I think prior to that, a lot of our movies were giant monster movies and Italian sword and sandal movies and things that were just clearly strange. And so I don't think so at all. I think that if anything, it was just the luck of the draw with that movie, and I think it just demonstrated that. I mean, what I like about it is it kind of demonstrated that movie riffing works with anything. Works with I mean, obviously that was like a backdoor pilot for Joe Don Baker, who is going to either be a series.
Yeah.
Or just a made-for-TV movie. And so I think that was just kind of a happy accident that happened to be my last show, and it worked,
Were there were emotions running high in that regard, or I know that it was your decision to leave. If you wanted to take us through that decision.
Well, I don't think emotions were that high. I mean, we're all from the Midwest, so,
Yeah.
we're pretty isolated, icy people, and I just think that everything was pretty compartmentalized as far as our emotions go. I really appreciate that everybody did a great job for my last show. I thought that was really nice.
Yeah.
And, my take was, the backstory, if you haven't heard it, was really I was not getting along with my partner, Jim Allen. And we were just, it mostly had to do with the Mystery Science Theater feature film.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to get a feeling like I didn't really want to be a part of it. I just kind of felt like it wasn't maybe going to work the way we were hoping it was going to. Because at the time we were really excited because we thought it would be kind of like Star Trek: The Next Generation, where they stopped making the series and they started making a movie every year or two. And we assumed that's what would happen. We were kind of going, well, we're obviously not going to start the show up again after we make a feature. When you graduate to features, that's it. That's what you do. And we thought, oh, that'd be pretty cool because we just make one really good show every year instead of 22 shows. So on paper, it looked really good, but I just started to get a feeling like this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work, and it's going to be kind of my face on it. And so that's when I started to kind of go, I don't think I should be the guy to do it. I don't think I should be on camera, for this one.
Yeah, you seem to have a really interesting work ethic where again, I think it's a really admirable trait. You don't see this a lot where people kind of leave when the getting is good because the getting's not going to be good afterwards. And a lot of people would rather ride something out until the bitter end where, everything that you loved about the property or whatever is long done for. But to sort of leave at that sort of that high water mark, I think that's a really admirable trait.
Well, thanks. I'm really from outside of show business. And so when you're a person who's outside of show business and you want to get into it, you get into it because it's profound. You have these experiences and you just go, oh man, I really want to do that. It's not because you have somebody in the business or you have an uncle or something and they go, you've got talent, I could introduce you to some people. It's like when you're outside of it, it's like a completely different path and you don't see it like a long life. You see it like, oh man, I gotta get this right. People are depending on me. And it's really different. It's really a different attitude and a different attack. And I just kind of felt like, and I think all my references are based on music, where prior to that, like, there wasn't any clear, like, models, but I just think in the music business, you'd kind of see these examples where a really great band would get signed by a big record company, and it would wreck them. They'd gloss them up, and they'd, like, kind of make them look cuter, and they'd give them music that was broader, and you could just feel it, and it was less. They basically just wrecked the band. And so if you see that happen enough, you start to go, man, I have to be really careful the way I do this. And so yeah, I was concerned about the feature at a certain point. I didn't think it was going to work the way it was going. And then I said, I have to kind of get out of this situation. And so that was kind of I didn't feel like I was heard enough creatively. And so that was kind of my creative gestures to pull myself out.
There's, I just kind of wanted to move on to, because I'm really excited about this new venture you have, and it's sort of kind of continues your, I guess I would call it an indie spirit. Cinematic Titanic is kind of, it's not connected to any network. It's not connected to anything. You guys are doing it all yourselves and kind of bring in the internet age, bring the content directly to people. You're doing live shows. It seems like a much more raucous, sort of rewarding experience. Where did that come from? Yeah. Was it kind of difficult to get everybody together? How'd that go?
Well, I think it was easy getting people together. Everybody was very enthused about it, and we kind of learned how to be funny with movie riffing. It's kind of like we all tried doing other things, and some of us were really successful at other things. But I think when you kind of have that experience with movie riffing, you just kind of personally, I just kind of wanted to do it again. I loved it, and it's still going. There's still this like fan base, and Mystery Science Theater still selling, DVDs. There's an audience there. We should do this, and it's worked really good. I mean, we've gotten to do like about 100 live shows.
Wow.
I think we about to put out maybe our 14th or 15th DVD and movie. So it's been really great. I mean, and that was the weird thing about doing Mystery Science Theater is you didn't really have any contact with the people who are watching what you were doing. And now, I feel like I know who they are now. I feel like I know who these people are. So it's been extraordinarily great.
Well, yeah, much like music, now you're touring. You got a touring band.
It's really fun, and I'm so grateful to get to do it. It's really cool.
A lot of the all the episodes on the website are noted as rated comparable to PG-13. And I know, now that you got, I mean, when, you get off, usually when people go off TV, they kind of come out F-bombs blazing. And, I mean, it just doesn't seem very consistent with your demeanor. So I was wondering if that was a conscious decision or where did that kind of come about? And has the writing been different to do is the writing different to do a cinematic Titanic versus, say, a Mystery Science Theater?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that there's a bunch of angles to it because the majority of the people that come, I'd say 90% at least, are Mystery Science Theater fans, and they come to see us movie riff and pay their respects and kind of I feel like they're there because they trust us.
Mm-hmm.
They know that kind of like it's going to be funny, but there's also a tone to it that Mystery Science Theater had that, to me, I'm like super proud of, that it wasn't like dirty, and kids would watch it, and kids would watch it with their parents. And so it's kind of like I don't know what more you could want,
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like that's everything to me, is if it's funny and like a whole family could watch it and like it. So I think they kind of come with that attitude, and it's kind of informed a lot of them over the years, especially people who started out watching it when they were kids. And so I think we try to respect that, and at the same time, it's in a theater, it's at night, the tickets are expensive. It tends to be the majority of adults. And so I don't think there's as many restrictions, and there's not puppets, So I think if we had puppets, I think that would kind of like, simmer us down. But yeah, it still happens. There have been people who have dropped the F-bomb, and personally, that really discourages me because I just go, because sometimes kids do come to our shows.
Yeah.
Like, I've worked so hard. I've never made $1 in my life being dirty, and now this happens. But it's usually kind of in the spirit of the moment, when someone does that. So they know how I feel, but it's also a certain amount about liberty too, and people kind of expressing themselves. So I try to be open-minded about it.
Personally, if I heard you swear, I would be very much like hearing like Andy Griffith swear. It's just sort of like, wait, that sound shouldn't come out of that mouth. You know what I mean?
You know what's funny? You know what? When we were in Milwaukee, Pat Oswald, who's a friend of ours, was doing a show there too, and he came to see our second show. And we were doing this movie called Hercules Unchained. No, it was Samson and the Seven Somethings, the Seven Miracles of the World or something. And there's just a moment where, this guy's looking around, and I just say, "This is bullshit." and after the show, Patton said, "Oh man, it really shocked me when you said bullshit, but now that I think about it, it was like the perfect thing to say." And so, I think that's about as blue as I get, which is kind of like as blue as a farmer gets to say bullshit. But anyway, so that was just an example of Patton saying, "You shocked me because you guys are usually really clean."
Yeah, and I'm sure he kind of has a similar experience as most people do, like watching so much of the show and not kind of hearing that. I kind of wanted to sort of wrap up with this because we're kind of right now. I mean, this podcast and other podcasts, we're kind of in a bad movie culture. Like you see, there's tons of blogs about bad movies. There's tons of I mean, Mystery Science Theater the direct lineage is pretty palpable. And you mentioned Patton Oswalt. Is it rewarding to hear people like younger comedians, myself included, everybody, kind of use you guys as an influence, you specifically? Is that, to sort of see your work live on like that?
Yeah, it's weird. It reminds me of when I got to talk to Frank Zappa, before he died, and it shocked me because he was a fan of the show, and I said the same thing to him. I go, "What's it like when we reference Frank Zappa song on the show?" He goes, "It's very unsettling." And I think I feel the same way. Like when people, are famous and they cite Mystery Science Theater as an influence, it's always slightly unreal, and you just go, "I guess, but it's just this thing we did one day, So yeah, it's a very weird thing. And at the same time, I enjoy the hell out of it. I'm thrilled that people like it, and that it's amazing to be talking about it 20 years after we started. That people still like it and watch it.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time. Cinematic.titanic.com. You guys are all over the country. The next time you're in New York City, I'm definitely going to be in the audience. It's been a real pleasure and a treat to talk to you, Joel. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you again. We'll see you.